Every single year, the world's most powerful people all get together in this snowy town in Switzerland to talk about, well, the future. But this year, something was very different. Something snapped. Today, we're going to unpack what happened, and we're going to do it through the lens of a really provocative report from philstockworld.com called We Friday, Wrapping Up the Old World Order. And let's just start with this quote from Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, because wow, it just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the mood at the World Economic Forum. To really get what our sources saying happened in Davos this year, you first have to understand what was so completely lost.
You see, for decades, this meeting in Davos had this clear, maybe a little lofty, mission. The whole thing was built on a very specific set of ideas about how the world is supposed to work. I mean, on paper, its purpose was to get all the global leaders, from business, from government, you name it, in one room to tackle the world's biggest problems. And that guiding principle was right there in their motto, right? Cooperation, to make the world a better place.
But, according to folks on the ground this year, the whole thing was turned on its head. All those old buzzwords you'd hear, sustainability, social justice, they just vanished. And in their place was this new language, a language of raw power politics, and what Mark Carney bluntly called pure transactionalism.
So what on earth caused a shift this big? Well, the entire event, the agenda, the atmosphere, the priorities, it was like it all started bending towards one single dominant presence, kind of like a black hole sucking all the oxygen out of the room.
When President Trump arrived, it wasn't just another visit. It was a fundamental recalibration of everything. It felt like he didn't just attend the conference. In a lot of ways, he became the conference.
And this shift was so obvious, you could see it happening in real time. The New York Times pointed out that the priorities of the global elite just seemed to change overnight. The whole event was practically sanitizing its language just to make the Trump administration feel right at home.
So let's look at the main characters in this new Davos drama. You had President Trump, of course, setting the new transactional rules of the game. You had Elon Musk, a guy who used to rip on Davos, making his very first appearance. And then you had the voices of defiance, right? People like Mark Carney and Gavin Newsom, who were standing up and calling out this new reality.
And if you want the absolute perfect example of this new transactional approach, you don't have to look any further than President Trump's big foreign policy initiative, an initiative he decided to officially launch right there at Davos.
It's called the Board of Peace. Now, it started as just a way to manage the Gaza ceasefire, but its ambitions, they just exploded. We're talking about a potential replacement for the United Nations, all made official with a big charter signing ceremony at the forum. And here's the kicker. The price of admission? A cool $1 billion. That's for a permanent membership on what President Trump called the most consequential body ever created. So yeah, peace, it seems, is now a subscription service.
That satirical analysis from philstockworld.com, they had a pretty, let's call it a blunt take on this whole thing. They basically argued that this transforms international diplomacy into a kind of protection racket. You know, pay your membership fee, you get a seat at the table. If you refuse, well, you might just face some threats, some tariffs, some exclusion.
Okay, so amidst all of this, not everyone was just going along for the ride. There were two key figures who offered really powerful, though very different critiques of what they were seeing. They were pushing back hard against this new transactional world.
First up, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and he did not mince words. He saw all the polite nodding and the accommodation from other world leaders not as diplomacy, but as just plain capitulation.
And then you had Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. His speech was called the most honest one of the whole forum, and his diagnosis was a little more somber. He basically said, look, the old system was never perfect. It was a useful fiction that gave us stability. A fiction, he believes, is now just being tossed out the window entirely. So when you put all these pieces together, this new transactionalism, the pay-to-play peace plan, these really stark warnings, what did we actually witness at Davos this year? What does it all add up to?
Well, that same satirical outlet, philstockworld.com, they offered this one very provocative conclusion. Davos 2026 wasn't a conference, it was a surrender ceremony. In their view, this was the moment the global institutional order just officially gave up and accepted a whole new set of rules for the game.
And this same analysis connects the stuff happening at Davos to a documented technique, making promises on a scale that is just so massive, so huge, that it just completely overwhelms your ability to scrutinize it. You know, whether it's claiming $18 trillion in investments when the reality is more like $100 billion, or Elon Musk promising robots are coming next year.
The argument is that the sheer scale of the claim is designed to just move the goalposts of what's real. So if you boil it all down, it seems like three key takeaways came out of Davos 2026. First, peace got monetized, turned into something you can buy. Second, these huge, grand promises about a robotic future were sold again. And finally, a really uncomfortable truth was just spoken out loud. The old way of doing things is gone. For good.
You know, for over 50 years, people have called this gathering a weather vane for the world, a thing that signals big shifts, like the rise of China or the power of AI. So if it's still an accurate indicator, the question we're all left with is this: what direction is that weather vane pointing now? And do we like where it's headed?